The drivers who entered the Monte Carlo Rally in the mid-1950s had to start thousands of kilometers away, a really long distance before they got to where they were going. Your distance is much shorter. Become a subscriber by clicking the button right there. Now, do it, you're done, thanks. Hello and welcome to the Audrain Automobile Museum and our exhibition, The Magic of Monaco. In this video, we're going to talk about the Monte Carlo Rally. And to do that, once again, I am joined by my friend Nick Waller. And Nick, it's one of those things that most people think of Monaco today for the Gran Prix race. But of course, the Monte Carlo Rally predates the Gran Prix by quite a bit of time. And what we're going to talk about today is sort of a midpoint in the history of the rally. Because we've got two great 1950s GT cars that sort of epitomize what rallying was all about in this period. And the Monte Carlo Rally also, as we mentioned in the exhibition introduction video, is still in its current form the last vestige of the old city-to-city, point-to-point races. And in fact, in this period of time, until the early 1990s, competitors could choose their starting points. So they started all over Europe. Some started in the UK, some started in Sweden, some started in Greece. And they received added points for the distance they traveled. And it was very interesting because the two cars we have here today, the spectacular Lancia Aurelia B20 and this Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, are great examples of the kinds of cars that would be extremely well suited for both the overland portion of the rally as well as the final mountain portion, which could be in snow, could be in bright sunshine, could be in ice. You just never knew what was happening in Monte Carlo.
It was an incredible challenge. The gauntlet was thrown down and you would build a car, you would get your entry okayed, you were part of the spectacle, and as you say, leaving from all over Europe, which I think is a fabulous idea, and it bore a huge variety of cars that were seen on the road. They were four-door sedans and saloons. They were two-door coupes and run by I have this picture of the British Spirit leaving Coventry or leaving the shores of the United Kingdom in their duffel coats and their woolly hats and their scarves, getting behind the wheel, and there'd often be four people in the team driving down to Monaco via a very ridiculous and circuitous route. And just what a lot of fun that could be.
Indeed, and also it's also one of those great moments where the very talented amateur and the very accomplished professional came to compete on a level playing field. Because there were so many variables about the Monte Carlo Rally. You could be a wonderful championship circuit driver and not necessarily do well in the Monte Carlo Rally. You could be someone that did one event a year, the Monte Carlo Rally, and triumph.
Yes, exactly. It gave birth to a number of famous people. We've spoken about Stirling Moss and his heroic Grand Prix drives. Stirling's sister, Pat Moss, was a wonderful rally driver, and she entered the Monte Carlo Rally many, many times and became famous for it. A wonderful family.
And it's also one of those cases where literally manufacturers used the Monte Carlo Rally to prove the durability and viability and performance of their cars. So you had all sorts of manufacturers as well, from the smallest to the largest, from manufacturers of sports cars to manufacturers of very ordinary family cars. And it's interesting, again, let's talk about the two cars that we have right here today. One of these being one of my favorite cars on the planet, the Lancia Aurelia B20. This car is loaned to us by our friend Charles Mallory. And it is just a wonderful example of the car because it's a mid-range car, fourth series car, it's the mid-1950s, and still right-hand drive. All Lancias actually made right-hand drive until 1955, when left-hand drive became an option. And it's one of those things that also made Lancias so incredibly successful in mountain rallying, because it's always easier, as you well know as a Brit, to place a car in a mountain road with a right-hand drive car.
It is. Well, right-hand drive, you mentioned this in Italy, it was the Italian favorite side to sit. They had this odd Although they were driving on the right, they liked to be on the right-hand side of the car. Very odd in Europe. But the Lancia B20 really was a car that was an engineering marvel. The engine, it was a monocoque. It was a first ever production V6 engine in any car. Wonderful. And Lancia pioneered the V format with the V4 in the Lambda, earlier pre-war cars. But this was a monocoque chassis, independent suspension all round. It really was a collection of engineering masterpieces.
Now, I have to say, you forgot one of the most wonderful aspects of this car, engineering-wise. Rear transaxle, inboard rear brakes. This is a car introduced in 1950.
Yeah, yeah.
And no wonder it was so incredibly capable as a performance car. As a matter of fact, a basically stock, slightly massaged B20 actually won at Le Mans, won in the Mille Miglia.
Yes.
I mean, absolutely extraordinary cars. So they were great circuit racers, they were great rally cars. They did extremely well in the Monte Carlo Rally. In fact, won the 1954 rally, although it was later disqualified for various bogus reasons. But that's also part of the history of the Monte Carlo Rally, which we'll talk about in a later video. Sometimes the post-event scrutineering took on a slightly political bent.
Oh, and nothing has changed. Come on.
But the Aurelia B20 is, again, one of those cars that is such a joy to drive.
Yeah.
The Lancia engineers got right back in 1950, something which other manufacturers were still struggling with in the 1970s, a linkage to a rear transaxle with a column or floor-mounted gear shift that was absolutely remarkable. You thought that this lever, wherever it was on the column or the floor, was directly going to a gearbox.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely astonishing.
And it is beautifully done. But I've driven one, and it doesn't feel like a transactional. I've driven cars with a transactional gear a lot. And wait a minute, which car am I sitting in? Whether it's that side or whether it's this side, you feel completely disconnected.
Exactly.
The linkage just is flexing and it's all over the place. But no, this is beautifully done.
Here at the Audrain Automobile Museum in Newport, Rhode Island, you can not only see the great legendary Maserati 250F here in person in the gallery, you can also drive it on the great streets of Monaco. Come in and try our simulators. You'll love it. And of course, the Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing.
Yeah.
The car, of course, born from the W194 racer, Mercedes' first sports racer after the war.
Yeah.
And the famous Max Hoffman said,
Yes.
well, build me a few of these and I can sell them to my American customers. And Mercedes said, yeah, sure. And they did, and he did.
Yeah.
And the car quickly became a legend. Although it's very interesting that they did run the 300 SL in the Monte Carlo Rally, but the great success in Monte Carlo came with Mercedes sedans.
Yes. Well, of course, that's what they wanted. They were the Monte Carlo Rally was a showpiece for manufacturers. So you do well on the Monte Carlo Rally, you're going to sell cars the next day. But this car was used by Mercedes in various rallies. It was also used, I keep bringing him up, by Stirling Moss to recce the famous Mille Miglia 1955 race that he won with Dennis Jenkinson. He recce'd it in a Gullwing.
It's also one of these cars that the performance of the Gullwing today is still prodigious.
Yeah.
Back in the 1950s, this was, I mean, we think we know hypercars today. This had performance that was better than 3 times that of a normal car in the mid-1950s. Yeah. So again, it's probably one of the reasons why this was not the Monte Carlo Rally beater, because it probably had too much power for the Monte Carlo Rally.
Way too much, and way too much complicated engine, way too much complicated engineering underneath the body. It was basically the race car with a road-going bodywork.
There's a wonderful image, and if we can find it, we'll insert it in the video, of I believe it was a Spanish driver entered his 300 SL Gullwing in the Monte Carlo Rally, and he finished, but not after some intervention with something during the route, and his right front fender is completely ripped open, and there's a wonderful image of Aristotle Onassis and John Wayne in Monaco looking at the car, and you think, okay, this is probably an example of he's in the mountains above Monaco, he's coming down, and he's got this great turn of speed, and there's a stone wall.
Wow.
And, you know, whatever it might have been.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that you know, you have to be very careful about the weapon you bring to a fight.
I'd love to know what Alfred Neubauer, the famous Mercedes team manager, would have made of John Wayne. That would have been a conversation to listen into, I think.
Indeed, and in fact. Let's just get back for a second about this period of rallying and the fact that it was such an incredible adventure of endurance. And it also speaks to something else as well, which is one of the great factors of the cars which was successful in the rally at this time, was that they were comfortable.
Yes.
And it's something that people often forget. In a competition car, you expect the competition car to be unyielding and very Spartan. But you realize if you had to turn thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers in this car, you'd better be able to be comfortable.
Well, that's possibly why this wasn't so successful, because it's not the most comfortable car to drive. It is claustrophobic, it gets very hot. So that's probably another reason why the sedans of the period were much more successful. But then towards the 60s, you go into the 60s, and you get the likes of Paddy Hopkirk driving the Mini Cooper. Not the most comfortable car in the world, but by golly, by gosh, it was hugely successful.
We'll get to that in another one of our highlights videos when we leap a little further forward in time with the Monte Carlo Rally.
Indeed.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you all for joining us here for this little preview of the exhibition, The Magic of Monaco, here at the Audrain Automobile Museum in Newport, Rhode Island. Be sure to keep watching here in the Audrain Museum Network for other videos about this exhibition, and also check us out in the Bloomberg Connect app. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you here again soon.